Athens Church, you've got style, scene 1 alpha.
What were you like as a kid?
I would say I was very challenging.
Really hyper.
I was a smart aleck, as we would say.
Kind of spunky.
Such a tomboy.
What would you say your style is now?
A little bit hippie-ish.
Always comfortable.
Matching.
Timeless.
I really don't have a style right now.
Can you describe your personality?
On or off the golf course?
Bright. Yeah.
Awesome.
Loud, very loud.
Outgoing.
Daring.
Spontaneous.
I don't want to say dramatic, but a little bit.
How do you best connect with God?
Through serving.
When I get in my car, I just turn worship music up really loud.
During intimate conversations with close friends and mentors.
Through His Word.
In nature is where I connect with God.
Well, good morning, Athens Church. If we didn't have the privilege of meeting a couple weeks ago, my name is Gerald Fediomi, and I have the privilege of serving on the college team here at Athens. And I don't know what you came in with this morning. I don't know if you came in needing a way made or a promise kept, but we really do believe that our God is a way maker, a miracle worker, a promise keeper, and a light in the darkness. We believe that for you, but we also believe that for every person in this city. And I'm so excited to be wrapping up this series that we've been in called You Got Style, because what we're going to talk about this morning, I think, is the thing that has the potential to make sure that the city knows the thing that we believe is true here at Athens Church and that you just sang this morning, that our God really is a way maker, a miracle worker, a promise keeper, and a light in the darkness for them as well. In order to get started this morning, what I want to do is take you back to a significant moment in my life. I want to take you back to May 25th, 2017. I remember the week leading up to this day like it was yesterday. All of my family and friends had flown into town. I was having lunches and breakfast and dinner with all of these significant people in my life leading up to arguably the biggest day of my life, the day that my wife and I got married. I remember the rehearsal and doing the walkthrough for the wedding, and I'm standing at the altar waiting for my wife to come down the aisle for the run-through, and she comes out in a dinosaur suit. Now, why exactly she did this, I'm still trying to figure out 2.5 years into marriage. It didn't really make any sense, but whatever, that's her. And so she comes down the aisle, we rehearse the whole thing. We go have our rehearsal dinner, and we had breakfast for dinner that night. It was so significant to us because we just love having breakfast for dinner. And so we're eating this breakfast, and my mentor, who's one of my groomsmen, he stands up in front of everyone, and he gives this speech, and it brings me to tears. But I'm not talking like tears, I'm talking about, girls, you know what I'm talking about when you cry and you can't catch your breath and you're like, I think I have asthma and I'm crying at the same time. What is going on? And so I'm doing this, snot running down my face in front of everyone. It's super embarrassing. And I finish that and I go back to my apartment and I'm hanging out with some of my groomsmen, and it's just a significant night of us spending time together. I remember the next day at the ceremony and seeing my wife walk down the aisle and how beautiful she looked as she walked down. I remember going through all of the rituals and saying the I do's, and then the first thing that we would do together as a married couple is worship together in this space. I remember us going back and supposed to be eating, but we barely ate anything. We just kept looking at each other going, oh my gosh, we're married. This is crazy. Who let us do this? We're married, right? And then we come out for the beginning of our reception and we do this synchronized dance that my wife made me practice for 2.5 months leading up to it because she cheered for the Falcons professionally, so she's a really good dancer, and I just looked really stupid. And so we did that. And then I remember from there just people dancing for hours. I remember running out of the reception and everyone holding the sparklers, which is a major fire hazard, but we do that at every wedding. I remember getting in the car and going home. That weekend was so significant for me. That day was so significant for me. But I'll tell you the moment that was the most significant for me out of all of it. I was sitting at my best friend's house the morning before our wedding, And we had just finished hanging out, and it's around lunchtime now, and we're making steaks, and we're eating, and we're starting to get dressed. And it's at this point that I realized that I haven't wrapped my wife's gift. You know, it's customary that you give a gift to your wife on the day. And so I'm sitting down, and I'm starting to wrap the gift. And just as I begin wrapping it, there's a knocking at the door. And it's her maid of honor coming in with the gift that Kylie has prepared for me. Now, this is like a beautifully wrapped box. It looks like it just came out of like Pottery Barn or Restoration. It's like, it's ridiculous, it's perfect. And here I am like a 4-year-old just like slapping tape on things and like trying to put it all together. And so I hand her this gift that looks like a 4-year-old made it, and she hands me this perfectly wrapped gift. And I sit and I look at her box for a moment as her maid of honor walks out of the door and starts driving back to where my future wife would be. And as I'm looking at this box, I just have this thought in my mind, like, maybe I should wait to open it. Like, maybe I should wait, and then we would, like, be opening our gifts at the exact same time. I think I've seen The Notebook a couple times too many, and so I just had this romantic vision in my head that I'd wait, and we'd open the box, and it would be like this Hallmark moment. It's amazing. And so I wait for about 10 minutes, and then I start opening up the box. It's perfectly wrapped. I get inside the box, and I find this little wooden box, this decorated wooden box. And I open it up, and in it are a bunch of sheets of paper. And I'm like, this is the dumbest gift that she could have ever given me. She knows I love shoes. Why didn't you put shoes in the box? But then I start looking at the sheets of paper, and I realize that they're letters. Letters that Kylie had been writing to her future husband since 2014. And as I read the letters, I began to smile. And all of my groomsmen are looking at me, wondering why I'm smiling. And I'm smiling because I know at the exact same time that my wife is opening up this terribly wrapped gift that I've given her. And in the box, she would find a wooden box, this one to be exact. And she would open it up and see a bunch of sheets of paper that were letters that I'd been writing to my future wife since 2014. Now, if you're married in the room, the husbands are like, I hate you. The wives in the room are like, why didn't you write me letters? Stop listening to this. Bob, start writing the letters now. You have 38 years of letters to write me. Bob, get it together, right? But I love this moment so much because it was in this moment that all of my fears subsided. It was in this moment that all of my worries went away. And it was in this moment that I knew with 100% certainty in my heart that God had prepared this day for Kylie and I to be one. That God had prepared this moment for her and I to be united, for us to be on the same team, for us to be fighting for each other for the rest of our lives. That God had prepared this moment for us to be one. From there, we would go to the ceremony and we'd get married and we'd become one. Then we'd go to our honeymoon and we'd really become one. You know what I'm saying? And now that we're one, I'm like, this is going to be amazing. We're one. We're united. We're never going to fight. We're going to agree on everything. Exactly. He's married, and he's like, bruh, no. That is not the way it works. He's like, you dumb 30-year-old. That's not how it happens, right? Like, you don't get married and then start seeing everything the same way and agree on everything and never have arguments. That's not what it means to be one. And so for the last 2.5 years of our marriage, Kylie and I have been on this journey together, fighting together to learn what it means to be one, to learn how to be one when we are so different, to learn how to be one when we are so different. I mean, Kylie and I are different races. And so that makes us see the world from different perspectives. And so we're learning each other's perspectives, and we're learning how to be one, how to be united, how to fight for each other. We're from different parts of the country. Kylie's from Chicago, from the north. I'm from Atlanta, from the south. And so we're learning how to be one in spite of our cultural differences. She calls the remote a channel changer. It makes no sense. I'm like, are you 4? What are you doing? She puts L's in the words that don't have L's. Both is spelled B-O-T-H, not both. I don't know what that is, right? But we're fighting to be one. We have different family traditions. Her family for Christmas, they like to sit down on the couch and all watch White Christmas together, which is wrong on so many levels for me. It's also one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And my family likes to sit around and play board games like Settlers of Catan and Risk that take 4, 5, 6 hours to play. And the way that we show each other that we love each other in the middle of these games is by yelling at each other at the top of our lungs. We literally had to ban Monopoly from our house because my mom and dad were like, "You're cheating, stop cheating." And it was a display of love. It was a display of love. And Kylie sits at the table and she's like, "This is so stressful. And this is not fun." I'm like, "Baby, you'll learn. You'll learn." And we're learning how to be one because our traditions are different. As we think about a family of our own one day, like what will our traditions be? We're learning to be one. We're learning to be unified. We're learning to be united. We're learning to fight for each other. Why do we keep doing it? This is difficult. It's not easy. And we're really different. So why do we keep fighting for oneness? Why do we keep fighting for unity? Well, I'll tell you the reason why. It's because we believe that we are better together. That I'm a better husband, a better friend, a better leader, a better son because I'm with Kylie. That Kylie's a better wife, a better sister, a better friend because she's with me. That we really believe that we are better together. And in the moments where we doubt that, in the moments where we're not sure, we go back to this moment and we just remember, no. God has prepared us to be one. This was his desire. This was his design. This was his hope for us. Why are we talking about this morning? Well, because as much as I believe that this is true for my marriage, I also believe that this is true for the church. That even though we're different races, even though we come from different backgrounds, even though we have different family traditions and different cultures, that we were designed, we were made to be united, that we were made to be one. If you've been with us for the last few weeks of this series, we've been talking about this idea of styles. It comes from the book Sacred Pathways by Gary Thomas. And what Gary Thomas did was look through church history and look through the scriptures, and he found these 9 different pathways by which we all connect with God. And so we've said, hey, each of us has our own pathway, or each of us has our own style, that we're all uniquely wired to connect with God in our own different ways. And so for the last 3 weeks, we've been talking about our differences. We've been talking about how you're individually wired to connect with God. If you haven't taken the test yet, you need to take it even though we're done with the series. Go to AthensChurch.com and you can take it, and it'll show you how you're wired. It'll show you how to connect with God. So we've talked about styles. We've talked about connecting with God through prayer by our style. We've talked about connecting with God through scripture by our style. We've spent 3 weeks talking about how we're all so different, and that's a really good thing. Like, it's a really good thing for you to understand your wiring. It's a really good thing for you to understand how you're made. It's a really good thing for you to understand how you best connect with God. And our hope is that over the course of this series that you have fallen in love with your style even more, and that you've grown in intimacy and relationship with Jesus over the last few weeks, and that you'll continue to do that in the years to come. But here's the danger in all of this. The danger in learning your style, the danger in identifying how different you are, the danger in falling in love with the way that you best connect with God is that you can start to believe that your way is the best way. That we can think that our way is the best way to connect with God. And when we think that our way is the best way, here's the danger, is that when we think we're the best, everyone else is less. And we start looking at the way that other people connect with God, and we start putting them on a rating scale of less spiritual than we are, of less holy than we are, of less connected than we are. Or worse than that, we don't just think our style is best. We don't just think our way is best. We start to believe that our way is the only way. And we think that our way is the only way to connect with God. And the danger is this, is then you start looking at people and going, oh, you don't do it like I do it, so I'm not sure that you're a Christian. You don't operate the way that I operate. I'm not sure that you're in. You don't worship the way that I worship. Oh, you go to that church? Ugh. I'm not sure if we believe the same thing. And as we fall in love with our own styles, our own preferences, our own ways to connect with God, if we begin to think that our way is better or our way is best and our way is the only way, there are 2 things that will happen as a result. One is division, and the other is disbelief. Division and disbelief. belief, that there will be division within the church, within your own families, amongst your friends, in your neighborhoods, that you and your wife will find yourself fighting because you think your way is better than her way, and now you guys can't seem to get on the same page. You think your way is the right way and his way is the wrong way, and so now you don't spend time praying together or connecting to God with each other, even though that was God's design for you. You start thinking that your way is the only way or the best way, and it leads to churches who hate each other and talk about each other as they walk past each other in the grocery stores. It leads to division in our church, but worse than that, it leads to disbelief. Because there's a world of people who are watching the church, and they're going, "Wait, I thought like love was the thing with you guys. But I heard the way you talked about their church, and I hear the way that they talk about them, and I heard the way you talked about him. I thought y'all were supposed to love each other. You want me to believe that there's a God that loves me, but you can't love each other?" No, I'm not sure if I believe that. I'm not sure that I could believe that. Because it seems that you're the exact opposite of the very thing you preach. And so y'all, I think this is the reason that Jesus prayed what he prayed. Like before Jesus left the planet Earth, he spent a couple of moments praying. One prayed for himself that he would be glorified, that everyone would believe that he actually was the Son of God. He prayed for his disciples and for the ministry that they were about to take on, for the opportunities that they would have to share the good news of who he was with their cities and with the world. But after he finished praying for his disciples, Jesus does something really interesting. He prays for the generations that would follow. He prays for you and for me. I want to show you what he says. It's found in John chapter 17, starting in verse 20. Jesus says this. He says, "My prayer is not for them alone." This is in reference to his disciples. He's just finished praying for them. He says, "I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you." And so Jesus, right before he ascends back into heaven and leaves the earth until his return, he prays this prayer for the next generation. "Father, I pray that they would be one. I pray that they would be united. I pray that they would fight for each other in the same way that you and I are one, in the same way that you and I are united. Father, I pray that that would be true of the church. I pray that that would be true of the next generations. I pray that they would learn to fight for each other." And then he goes on to show us why. He says, my prayer is not only for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. And so Jesus prays for unity for us. He prays for oneness for us. He prays for us to fight for each other. And the reason that he prays for it, he says, his own words, hey, if they aren't one, if they aren't united, if they don't fight for each other, then it affects the way that the world sees me. It affects whether they'll believe in me. It'll affect whether they can trust me. If they can't trust the church, then they won't trust me. If they can't see love demonstrated to the church, then they won't believe that I loved them. Father, would you help them to be one? Would you help them to be united? Would you help them to fight for each other so that they will believe in me? Essentially what Jesus is saying is this, is that our unity affects his credibility. That our unity affects his credibility, that our ability to be united, our ability to be one, our ability to fight for each other affects the way that the rest of the world will see him. And so while we can agree and believe in this room that our God is a way maker, a miracle worker, a promise keeper, and a light in the darkness, Jesus would say the rest of the world won't believe that unless we can figure out how to be one. And so the question this morning is this, is what does it look like to be one? What does it look like to be united? What does it look like to fight for each other? Well, I love the way that the Apostle Paul paints this picture. He takes this idea from Jesus of being united, of being one, and he paints a beautiful illustration of what this could look like. I'm going to read this from the Message version. If you're not familiar with the Message, a guy by the name of Eugene Patterson actually took the scriptures and and translated them in a way that we would be able to understand them in modern language for us. And I just love his translations of Paul's words. In 1 Corinthians 12, starting in verse 12, he says this. He says, "You can easily enough see how this kind of thing works, how unity, how oneness works, by looking no further than your own body." He said, your body has many parts, limbs, organs, cells, but no matter how many parts you can name, you're still one body. It's exactly the same way when it comes to Jesus. It's exactly the same way with Christ. So Paul is saying, hey, you know how your body works? You got a hand, got some elbows, some knees, legs, feet, head, other parts, private parts that we're not going to talk about right now. That's not me. Literally, Paul says that you should go read 1 Corinthians 12. It's crazy. He's like, hey, there's those secret parts just for you 12-year-old boys out there who are going to giggle when I say this. Everyone has parts. And he's going, you know how every part you have is connected and how they all make up one body? He goes, that's the way that it works with the church. That every part is important, every part is significant, but it's all connected to make up one Gerald. It's all connected to make up one Sean. It's all connected to make up one Sarah, one Jill, one John, one Bill, one Bob. It's all connected to make one body. And then he goes on to say this. He says, the way God designs our bodies is a model for understanding our lives together as a church. Every part is dependent on the other part. The parts we mention and the parts we don't. See, he did it. The parts we see and the parts we don't. If one part hurts, every other part is involved in the hurt and in the healing. And if one part flourishes, then every other part enters into the exuberance. We are Christ's body. That is who we are. You must never forget this. So Paul says, hey, all the parts are connected. All the parts are important. They all work together to represent one person, and that person is Jesus. And so you can't think that your part is more important than their part. And you can't think that your way is better than their way. No. We're all in this together. We're all fighting together. And if one person hurts, we all hurt. And if one person wins, we all win because we are connected. Or I could say it like this. If one church hurts, we should all hurt. And if one church wins, we should all celebrate their win together because we're all fighting on the same team. We're all in this together, to quote the great High School Musical. We're fighting for each other. We're fighting to be one. We're fighting to be the body of Christ. So I think if the Apostle Paul could jump into history right now, and he could speak into the series, You Got Style, I think what Paul would say is, hey, if you're an intellectual in the room, you're a part of the body. And your part is so significant because there's people in the world who need to know the why behind the what. There's people in the world who need to know the history behind Jesus. There's people in the world who have questions about how it all came to be. And if you're an intellectual, you get to be a part of the solution by answering the question why for people. And so you have a part to play, and it's important. I think Paul would say, hey, if you're a caregiver in the room, you're a part of the body. And your part is significant because there's people all over the world who are hurting. There are people all over the world who are in need, and they need to know that God sees their hurt, God sees their pain, God knows about their need, and you get to be an answer to their prayers by showing up and caring for them in the way that Jesus has cared for you. You have a part to play in the body. I think if Paul was here, he would say, hey, to the enthusiasts, there's a world of people who think church is boring, who thinks following Jesus is outdated, and your role in the body is you get to show them how exciting a relationship with Jesus is. You get to show them the adventure that it could be. You get to show them the journey and the hope and the love and the excitement that there is in following Jesus. If you're a sensei in the room, I think Paul would say, hey, there's a bunch of people who can't physically see or touch Jesus. That's all of us. And they wrestle with it. But because you experience God through your senses, you have felt God in some tangible ways, and you get to explain and show people that there is a way to connect with God right here on this planet Earth, even though you can't see him or touch him. And if you're contemplative in the room, then Paul would say, hey, you love spending time adoring God. You love spending long periods of time just sitting with and being in his presence. And your part to play is to show the world that God is not just some big, far off, distant God, but that he's personal and he's intimate and he wants to know you and he wants you to know him. And if you're an ascetic in the room, I think Paul would say, hey, you separate and you go sit in quiet. And in the busyness of the world that we're in, you get to set the example to people that you can actually disconnect and the world will keep working and you can go and spend some time with your Heavenly Father and you can know him in a really, really intimate way, and that God's not too busy and he's not too rushed and he's not too much in a hurry to spend time with you. And if you're an activist in the room, I think Paul would say to you, hey, there's a world who needs to know that God sees the injustice. There's a world who needs to know that that's not okay, and you get to represent Jesus in fighting against and fighting for his name in that situation. You get to show the world that we're not just a bunch of people who talk a good talk, but that we walk the walk. And if you're a naturalist in the room, I think what Paul would say to you, man, the way that you see nature is incredible. He wrote it in Romans 1:20, that in all things we can see that God created it. That we can experience the fullness of God by just stepping out into nature. And you get to display for everyone else that when you step outside on a beautiful fall day, it's not just a beautiful fall day. You are stepping into the creation of God. And as a naturalist, you get to remind them of that. I think Paul would say to the traditionalists in the room, he'd go, hey, there's been thousands and thousands of years of church history. Thousands and thousands of years of rituals that we've done. Communion from the very beginning of the movement. And you get to invite people into a deep, rich tradition of following a Savior. And they can experience him in ways that people have for thousands of years. You see what Paul was saying when he wrote what he wrote? Is that all of us are significant. Is that all of us are important. But bigger than that, all of us are necessary if people are going to see the fullness, the magnitude, and the greatness of our God. And so as different as we are, Paul would say, no, you got to fight for unity. Jesus would pray, you got to fight for oneness. We have to fight for each other. Because here's the deal. Unity is not uniformity. Unity doesn't mean you have to vote the way that they vote. Unity doesn't mean you have to dress the way that they dress. Unity doesn't mean you have to act the way that they act, walk the way that they walk, talk the way that they talk, connect with God the way that they connect with God. That's not what unity is. No. Unity is setting our differences aside to make a difference. That's what unity is. Unity is finding common ground for the common good. That's what unity is. Unity is the realization that we are better together. And I don't know about you, but when I think about the state of our country right now, I think, man, we could stand to be more unified. We could stand to fight for each other. We could stand to set our differences aside so that we can make a difference in the world. We could stand to find common ground for the common good. We could stand to be on the same page. And if anyone should set an example for what this looks like, it should be the church. It should be us. Y'all, if we get this right, it's a game changer. If we get this right, it could change the world. How do I know? Because it's happened once before. Y'all, the church would be so much more attractive. The church would be so much more influential. The church would be so much more effective if we could figure out how to be one. How to be united, how to fight for each other. And so I want you to hear it from me. At Athens Church, we believe with all of our heart that we are all on the same team, not just in this room, but with every other church in the city. We're not competing. We're fighting together for the glory of God. We're fighting together to show a broken world and to show a broken city, hey, there is a God who is for you, not against you. There's a God who loves you, who sees you, who cares for you. He is a way maker, a miracle worker, a promise keeper, a light in the darkness, and we are all fighting to make sure you know that. And we just get to be a part of the fight. So can you imagine what would happen if all of our churches got on the same page and said, yeah, I know we're different, but let's set those differences aside and fight for the one thing that matters, for Jesus. Can I just take it one step further? This is beautiful for the church. It's also beautiful for you. Because if you decide to be the kind of person who really believes that we are better together, can I just tell you, you become a lot more attractive, you become a lot more influential, and you become a lot more effective. Can you imagine being the kind of boss who goes, hey guys, I know everyone's different, we all bring our own different gifts to the table, but we're gonna fight for the same thing. So everyone come to the meeting, set your pride aside, set your differences aside, set the disputes that you have among you aside, and let's put all of our efforts together and fight for this one goal. Can you imagine how much more effective your company would be? Can you imagine if you were the kind of parent who went, I know kid, you're weird. Like 7-year-olds are weird, but you're like weird. And your older sister, who's a teenager, she's rude. I get it. Hey, but we're a family, and we're gonna be one. And so you're gonna fight for your sister, and she's gonna fight for you, and you just need to know that we love you, and we're for you, and we're gonna keep fighting together as a family, and we're gonna be united. And so if you hurt, we hurt. If you win, we win. We are all in this together. Can you imagine the kind of boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, friend, leader, teacher that you would be if you took on this idea that we are all in this together, that we are better together? We all decided to fight for unity. We all decided to fight to be one. A couple years ago, I got to sit in a meeting with Andy Stanley, and he invited a bunch of young leaders into the room. And we started this conversation about something that was really controversial. And we all had our own opinions and our own thoughts. And I remember in the middle of the conversation, Andy stopped us all and he said, hey guys, just remember, it's really important for us to decide to be a student and not a critic. It's really important. Like, everyone's entitled to their opinion, everyone can have your own thoughts, all that's good. But just remember that it's better to be a student than a critic. Because what a critic does is points a finger and goes, there's nothing I can learn from you, there's nothing that I can take away from you, you're wrong, I'm right, end of conversation. But what a student does is they go, yeah, we might disagree, we may not see things the same way, but there's something I can learn from you. I bet there's something you could learn from me. And so I'm gonna suspend my judgment. I'm gonna set aside my differences. I'm gonna try my best to learn from you. He said that, and it reminded me of what we'd do once a month at the YMCA. It's where I worked before I became a pastor. And once a month, we'd have somebody come in, and all of our staff would sit down together, and they'd pay for our lunch as a way to kind of like sweeten the deal. And then the person would come in and they'd talk about something that none of us wanted to listen to, and so we were texting and emailing each other during the whole thing, like making fun of the person, and then they leave and we go back about our days. We used to call them lunch and learns. And I would sit in these lunch and learns as a 22, 23-year-old, and I would think, yeah, this is dumb. This is a waste of my time. There's nothing I can get out of this. So give me my free food. I'm gonna send my emails. I'm gonna crack some jokes with my friends, and I'm gonna go on about my day. Can I just tell you now as a 30-year-old what I wish I would have done back then? I wish I would have suspended my judgment. I wish I would have set my differences aside. I wish I would have chose to be a student and not a critic. Because I guarantee you that over those 10 years at the Y, I missed a lot of gold. Over those 10 years at the Y, I missed a lot of knowledge, a lot of insight, a lot of things that could have made me a better husband, a better leader, a better friend. Now, if I could go back, I wish I would have sat at that table and learn from the people who were standing in front of me. And so as we wrap up our series, here's my challenge to you. Lunch and learn. Would you be willing this week to find someone who's different than you and take them to lunch and just learn? To suspend your judgment, to suspend your differences, and to go, what can I learn from the person sitting across the table from me? Maybe it's a friend, It's different. Maybe it's someone in your neighborhood who goes to a different church than you. Maybe it's your spouse and you guys see things differently in a certain way, or you worship differently, and maybe it's taken time to learn each other better. Maybe it's your kid. I don't know who it is for you, but I am just telling you, if we would choose to do this, it is a step towards unity. And the more steps that we take towards unity, the more we look like the church that Jesus prayed for. And according to Jesus, not even the gates of hell can stand against that kind of church. So let's be united. Let's be one. And let's fight for each other. Father, thank you so much that you allow us to be a representation of you. That in each individual way, with each of our different parts and with each of our different styles, that collectively we come together and we can show the world your goodness, your grace, your love, and your truth. And so, Father, as we wrestle through our differences, as we wrestle through our uniqueness, as we fight against our own wirings and our own personalities, Father, would you help us to suspend those so that we can learn to love, care for, know, and learn from the people around us in a different way? And as we do that, Father, would the world around us see that there's a different kind of church here in Athens? Would the world around us see that you are who you say you are? Would the world around us see that you are a way maker, a miracle worker, a light in the darkness, and a promise keeper? We love you, and we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.